Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really classic story. We're talking about the legendary Indian monarch King Krishnadeva Raya and his famously witty minister, Tenali Rama. But look, we're not just here to retell some folklore today. Actually, we're going to use this specific encounter to completely rethink communication, empathy, and what happens when the absolute deepest messages are delivered without a single sound.
So that brings us to a huge question. Can silence actually be more powerful than words? I mean, think about our modern world, right? We are constantly bombarded by texts, emails, speeches, endless chatter. We're totally obsessed with what's being said. But I want you to prompt yourself with this today. How good are we at interpreting the unsaid? Like, how often do we actually pause to look at the actions, the real intentions, and the underlying emotions of the people around us when they just kind of can't find the right words? Keep that in the back of your mind as we journey through this incredible story.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The King and the Farmer.
So we find King Krishnadeva Raya doing exactly what good leaders do. He's out of his palace, actively touring his kingdom. And of course, he's accompanied by his usual entourage of ministers, which includes the famously clever Tenali Rama. Now, as they're traveling, they come across a commoner. It's a simple, illiterate farmer who's just working hard in his sugarcane field. You really have to imagine the sheer contrast to this moment. You've got the ultimate power and grand language of the royal court, literally coming face to face with the quiet, grounding, gritty reality of agricultural life.
The king stops, smiles, and asks the farmer this incredibly direct question. Tell me, farmer, how is your king? Now, this is a deceptively simple question, isn't it? But think about how loaded that actually is. It's like the ultimate spontaneous performance review. The king is asking a commoner, a guy who literally works the dirt of his kingdom, for a totally honest assessment of his rule.
Well, the farmer's response is where this whole story gets utterly fascinating. He doesn't utter a single syllable, nothing. Instead, he turns around, walks deeper into his field, chops down a fresh piece of raw sugarcane, walks right back, and just places it directly into the king's hand. He uses an action instead of speaking. It's a profoundly bold move, leaving absolutely everyone standing there trying to interpret what on earth he actually means.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the courtier's misunderstanding. Whenever there's an information vacuum, like a really long, awkward silence, people tend to project their own fears and biases right into it. And the courtiers? They immediately take this hyper-literal, highly negative view. One of them instantly speaks up and tells the king, "Your Majesty, this is an insult. He wants to chop you up just like the sugarcane and throw you away." I mean, they literally saw a blade and just jumped straight to violence and disrespect. They left absolutely no room for a more empathetic or even logical interpretation.
But words hold a lot of weight, right? Especially when they come from trusted advisors. So hearing his courtiers jump to this terrifying conclusion, the king immediately gets worried. He looks anxiously at this silent farmer. And this right here perfectly illustrates the danger of misreading communication. A completely innocent, albeit silent gesture has literally been twisted into a threat of treason simply because the observers lack the emotional intelligence to read the room. And now, the situation is totally spiraling out of control.
Enter Section 3, Tenali Rama's explanation.
So, Tenali Rama steps in, he looks at the king, looks at the farmer, and calmly provides this incredibly beautiful, empathetic translation of the silent action. He says, "The farmer means that his king is sweet, kind, and nurturing to his people, just like this sugarcane." In a matter of seconds, Tenali diffuses all that tension by looking way past the literal cutting of the plant and focusing on the true essence of the gift itself.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how Tenali brilliantly breaks down the metaphor to prove his point to those angry courtiers. Think about a sugarcane for a second. It's incredibly hard on the outside, right? And that represents the strict discipline and the tough strength the king has to project to protect his realm. But on the inside, it's full of the sweet juice, representing the kind, nurturing, and generous heart the king has for his subjects. Tenali didn't just interpret an action, he delivered a profound compliment wrapped in a total masterclass of metaphorical thinking. And as soon as Tenali finishes speaking, man, the sheer relief is just palpable. The farmer immediately bows his head in this vigorous agreement. He confirms to the king, "Yes, Your Majesty, that is exactly what I meant. I simply didn't have the words to express it." And you can imagine, the king's anxiety just completely melts into a wide smile. He's deeply touched by the farmer's true sentiment, and of course, richly rewards him. But more importantly, the king realizes that Tenali didn't just hear the silence, he actually heard the farmer's heart.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 4. The story's main lesson.
Following this whole resolution,
Tenali Rama humbly tells the court this: not everyone can express themselves with words. Wisdom is not just in listening, but in understanding emotions. And honestly, this highlights a massive blind spot that we pretty much all have. We tend to expect everyone to be perfectly articulate, to have the exact vocabulary on hand to match their feelings. But human beings are infinitely more complex than a dictionary.
So, what actually is true wisdom? Well, it's the ability to look past literal words, or, like in our farmer's case, the total lack of them, to accurately understand the underlying emotions, the true intent, and the heart of another person. See, the courtiers, they only had superficial intelligence. They looked at the situation and saw a knife and a chopped stock. But Tenali Rama possessed real emotional intelligence. He saw a humble man offering literally the sweetest thing he owned.
And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. Think about your own daily life, with your family, your colleagues, your friends. Are you merely listening to the literal words they say? Or are you doing the real, hard work to truly understand the emotions and intentions behind them? The next time someone struggles to communicate with you, try not to be a cynical courtier jumping to conclusions. Be like Tenali Rama. Take a beat and look for the sweetness in their silence. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.